Your soulmate just walked away from everyone. The unexpected reason is finally coming to light. There is a moment when someone stops explaining themselves. They stop answering every question. They stop defending every decision. They stop trying to make everyone understand what is happening inside their heart. They simply become quiet, step away, and leave people wondering what could possibly have caused such a sudden change. And in this spiritual style message, that is where your story begins. Something shifted around your soulmate recently. Whether it happened last night, in a private conversation, during a moment of silence, or through something they suddenly realized about their own life. The energy of the situation feels completely different from before. They walked away from people. They walked away from pressure. They walked away from opinions. And perhaps most importantly, they walked away from the version of themselves that had been pretending everything was fine. But there is something you need to understand before you judge their silence. Walking away does not always mean walking away from you. Sometimes a person walks away because they can no longer continue living a life that contradicts what they know deep inside. Sometimes distance is not rejection. Sometimes silence is not indifference. Sometimes a person disappears into their own thoughts because they are finally forced to confront a truth they have avoided for far too long. And that is why the next part of this story may surprise you. Your soulmate may have been carrying a secret, not necessarily the secret you have imagined, not necessarily the secret that everyone around them suspects. There may be another layer underneath the obvious story, and this is where the situation becomes emotionally complicated, because the confession coming into the light may involve a marriage, a relationship, a commitment, a promise, or a life arrangement that has existed longer than you realized. But even that may not be the biggest secret. The biggest secret could be why they allowed themselves to remain trapped in something they no longer felt connected to. The biggest secret could be what they were afraid would happen if they told the truth. And the biggest secret of all could be what they realized about you when they finally stopped running from themselves. Think about the symbolism of someone walking away from everyone. They did not simply walk away from one person. They may have become exhausted by the expectations surrounding them. Everyone had an opinion. Someone wanted them to stay. Someone wanted them to choose differently. Someone wanted them to maintain an image. Someone wanted them to continue pretending. And eventually, the weight became too much, so they withdrew. They became quieter. They began observing rather than speaking. They started questioning decisions they had previously accepted without thinking, and somewhere in that silence, something became impossible for them to ignore. You, not necessarily because you were physically present, not necessarily because you contacted them, but because the memory of you represented something they had been avoiding. It represented honesty. It represented vulnerability. It represented the possibility of being known without pretending, and sometimes the person who makes us confront ourselves is not the person we expected to matter so much. That may be why this situation feels confusing. You may have wondered why their behavior changed, why they became distant, why they seemed emotionally divided, why one moment they appeared close and the next moment they disappeared, why their actions sometimes seemed to contradict their words. There may have been an internal battle happening that you could not see, and now that battle may be reaching a turning point. Imagine someone sitting alone late at night, surrounded by everything they have built, yet feeling unable to escape the questions inside their own mind. What am I doing? Why am I still pretending? What happens if I finally tell the truth? Who will be hurt? Who will leave? Who will judge me? And most importantly, what happens if I finally admit what I actually feel? Those questions can change a person. They can make someone look at their life differently. They can make yesterday's choices feel completely different today. And perhaps something happened last night that brought one of those questions to the surface. Maybe there was an argument. Maybe someone confronted them. Maybe a conversation exposed an inconsistency. Maybe someone asked a question they were not prepared to answer. Or perhaps nothing dramatic happened at all. Maybe they simply reached the point where they could no longer lie to themselves. Sometimes the loudest turning points happen in complete silence. That is why you should not assume that because you did not see something, nothing happened. People can experience enormous emotional changes without announcing them to the world. Your soulmate may have been processing something privately, and if they truly are preparing to confess something important, they may not know how to begin. The first sentence is often the hardest. I need to tell you something. I should have told you sooner. There is something you don't know. I was afraid to tell you. I didn't know how to explain it. Those words can carry an enormous amount of weight. But remember something important. A confession is not automatically a promise, and a secret is not automatically proof of destiny. The healthiest way to receive any revelation is to listen carefully, ask questions, and allow reality to speak for itself. You do not have to decide everything in one moment. You do not have to accept an explanation simply because it sounds emotional. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to protect your peace. And that matters because the title of this message may sound dramatic, but the deeper message is about truth. Truth changes relationships. Truth changes choices. Truth changes the direction of people's lives. And sometimes truth arrives later than we wish it had. Your soulmate's possible marriage or existing commitment may be part of that truth. Maybe they married because of family expectations. Maybe they entered a relationship during a period when they were confused. Maybe they believed they could make themselves happy by choosing what looked safe. Maybe they were afraid of disappointing people. Maybe they stayed because leaving seemed impossible. Maybe the relationship became more complicated over time. There are countless human reasons people remain in situations that no longer fit who they have become. But there is another possibility that deserves attention. Perhaps the marriage itself is not the secret. Perhaps the secret is that they have been questioning it for a long time. Perhaps they have been living too emotional realities at once, the life everyone sees and the feelings they keep hidden. That does not make deception harmless. It does not erase responsibility. It does not mean you should wait endlessly for someone to make a decision. It simply means there may be more context than you currently know, and context matters, because you deserve facts, not confusion. You deserve honest communication, not endless guessing. You deserve actions that match words. If someone wants to enter your life, they must be willing to enter it honestly. No hidden arrangements, no secret promises, no endless uncertainty. No expectation that you will remain available while they avoid making responsible choices. That is part of the deeper spiritual lesson inside this story. Love is not supposed to require you to abandon your own dignity. Love is not supposed to make you chase someone who refuses to communicate. Love is not supposed to turn your entire life into a waiting room. And if this person is truly moving toward honesty, their next steps should demonstrate it. Not just their emotions, not just their words, their actions. This is why the unexpected reason behind their withdrawal may matter so much. They may have realized that they cannot continue trying to satisfy everyone. They may have realized that every decision made from fear eventually creates another problem. They may have realized that silence does not make complicated situations disappear. They may have realized that delaying the truth only makes the eventual conversation harder, and perhaps they have finally decided to face the consequences of being honest. That is a major emotional turning point. Because there is a difference between wanting to tell the truth and actually telling it. One requires intention, the other requires courage. Maybe that courage is beginning to grow. Maybe that is what happened last night. Maybe someone asked them where they were going with their life. Maybe a close friend noticed something. Maybe a family member confronted them. Maybe their current partner sensed the emotional distance. Maybe your soulmate saw something that reminded them of you, or maybe they simply looked at their own reflection and realized they had become someone they did not recognize. Whatever the trigger was, the important part is what happened afterward. They walked away. They chose solitude, and solitude can reveal things that noise keeps hidden. When everyone stops talking, your own thoughts become louder. When there are no distractions, feelings become harder to avoid. When there is no audience, a person can finally admit things they would never say publicly. Perhaps they admitted to themselves that they have been unhappy. Perhaps they admitted that they are afraid. Perhaps they admitted that they care about you more deeply than they expected. Perhaps they admitted that they do not know how to repair the damage they have already caused. And perhaps they realized that before they can ask anything from you, they must first clean up the unfinished parts of their own life. That could explain the distance. Not as an excuse, but as context. There is a difference, and you should remember that difference. If someone is truly changing, you should not have to convince them to change. You should not have to beg them to tell the truth. You should not have to compete with another person. You should not have to decode every message. You should not have to spend every night wondering what they meant. Healthy love eventually becomes clearer. The confusion may be intense during the transition, but the destination should be honesty. So if your soulmate is preparing to confess something, listen. But listen with both your heart and your wisdom. Do not let emotional words erase practical realities. If they say they are married, ask what that means. If they say the marriage is ending, ask what steps have actually been taken. If they say they have loved you secretly, ask why they chose secrecy. If they say they were afraid, understand the fear without taking responsibility for it. Their choices belong to them. Your choices belong to you. And perhaps that is why this message is not really about waiting for someone. It is about becoming strong enough to receive the truth without losing yourself inside it. Imagine the conversation. The room is quiet. They are nervous. They have rehearsed the words many times. They look at you and realize there is no perfect way to explain everything. They finally say, "There is something I should have told you," and suddenly, everything feels still. You may already suspect what comes next, but then they reveal something unexpected. Perhaps they admit that the marriage is real. Perhaps they admit that it has been emotionally complicated. Perhaps they tell you that they entered it for reasons that had little to do with love. Perhaps they confess that they have been afraid to leave. But then comes the part you never expected. They tell you that the biggest secret is not the marriage. The biggest secret is what the situation forced them to realize about themselves. They have been living according to other people's expectations. They have been trying to be the person everyone wanted. They have been afraid to disappoint people. They have been afraid of judgment. They have been afraid of consequences. And somewhere along the way, they stopped asking what they actually wanted. That realization can shake someone deeply, because once you understand that you have been living from fear, it becomes difficult to continue pretending fear is love. And perhaps you became part of that realization, not because you were responsible for saving them, not because you were destined to fix them, but because knowing you showed them a version of themselves they had forgotten. Maybe around you they felt calmer. Maybe they could laugh more naturally. Maybe they felt understood. Maybe they could speak without performing. Maybe they realized that connection does not have to feel like constant pressure, and that realization can be frightening when someone's life is already complicated. It can make them question everything. But here is the part you must remember. You are not someone's rescue mission. You are not responsible for their emotional healing. You cannot make their decisions for them, and you should never have to carry the consequences of choices you did not make. If they want a future with you, they must build that future responsibly. They must resolve existing commitments honestly. They must accept accountability. They must communicate clearly. They must respect everyone involved. And they must respect you. That is what real transformation looks like. Not dramatic declarations. Not secret promises. Not emotional late-night messages. Real transformation eventually becomes visible through behavior. This may be the unexpected reason they walked away from everyone. They may have realized that they cannot move forward while carrying every unfinished chapter behind them. They may have realized that before speaking to you, they need to speak honestly to themselves. And maybe that is why their silence feels different this time. Before, silence may have been avoidance. Now, perhaps it is reflection. Before, distance may have been confusion. Now, perhaps it is preparation. Before, they may have been running away from consequences. Now, perhaps they are preparing to face them. Only their actions can tell you which one is true. That is why you do not need to force the next chapter. Let the truth arrive naturally. If they have something important to say, give them the opportunity to say it. If they choose not to, you still have your answer. Your life cannot be placed on hold indefinitely because another person is undecided. There is something powerful about realizing that you can care deeply without chasing. You can love someone without losing yourself. You can hope without abandoning your standards. You can forgive without pretending nothing happened, and you can listen without surrendering your judgment. Perhaps this is the real message hidden beneath the dramatic title. Someone is walking away from the crowd so they can finally hear their own conscience. Someone is questioning the life they built. Someone is preparing to reveal information they have kept hidden. Someone may be realizing that their choices have consequences. And someone may finally understand that avoiding the truth does not protect anyone forever. There may have been a moment last night when everything became real. Maybe they looked at a message from you. Maybe they remembered something you once said. Maybe they heard a song that reminded them of an old conversation. Maybe they passed a familiar place. Maybe someone mentioned your name. Maybe they dreamed about a life they had never allowed themselves to imagine. Or maybe it was something much simpler. Maybe they were alone, and for the first time in a long time, they could hear themselves think. Sometimes the smallest moment becomes the biggest turning point. The mind starts replaying memories. One memory becomes another, a question appears, then another, and eventually, a person reaches a conclusion they have been avoiding. I cannot keep doing this. Those 6 words can begin an entirely different chapter, but the chapter does not become real until action follows. That is why you should watch what happens next, not obsessively, not anxiously, simply with awareness. If communication comes, pay attention to its quality. If an apology comes, look for accountability. If a confession comes, look for honesty. If promises come, look for consistent action. If they ask for time, decide what amount of time is healthy for you. And if they remain silent, do not turn silence into a fantasy. Silence can mean many things. Only communication can clarify it. This message is not here to tell you that a specific person will definitely marry you, return to you, confess tonight, or change their entire life because of you. No one can responsibly promise those things. Instead, take this as a reflective spiritual style story about truth, choices, and emotional awakening. Sometimes the person we think we are waiting for is actually going through a process that has nothing to do with timing and everything to do with responsibility. And sometimes the greatest revelation is not that someone loves you. It is that you finally realize you deserve love that is honest. That realization changes everything, because once you know your worth, you stop accepting crumbs simply because they are offered by someone you care about. You stop confusing intensity with commitment. You stop confusing secrecy with depth. You stop confusing longing with compatibility. You begin asking better questions. Is this person available? Are they honest? Are they consistent? Do their actions match their words? Do they respect my boundaries? Can they communicate difficult truths? Are they willing to take responsibility? Those questions may feel less romantic than destiny and soulmates, but they are much more important when real lives are involved. And perhaps your soulmate is learning the same lesson. Maybe they have finally understood that feelings alone are not enough. Maybe they have realized that love without honesty becomes painful. Maybe they have discovered that choosing what is comfortable today can create much greater pain tomorrow. Maybe they are finally ready to stop running, That could be why they walked away from everyone, not because they stopped caring, but because they needed to decide who they were when nobody else was telling them what to do. Think about that. When all the voices disappear, what remains? Your own values, your own conscience, your own truth, and perhaps that is exactly what they needed to find. Maybe they have spent years allowing other people to determine what their life should look like. Maybe they said yes when they wanted to say no. Maybe they stayed when they wanted to leave. Maybe they smiled when they were hurting. Maybe they became the dependable person everyone expected while quietly feeling lost inside. And now they are exhausted. They do not want another performance. They want honesty. That realization can make someone withdraw suddenly. People around them may not understand. They may say, "What's wrong with you?" They may say, "Why are you acting differently?" They may pressure them to return to the old version of themselves. But once a person sees something clearly, returning to ignorance is difficult. And perhaps they have seen something clearly about you. Maybe they finally understand that you were never asking them to be perfect. Maybe you were only asking them to be real. Maybe that is what made the connection different. You did not need them to perform. You did not need them to impress everyone. You wanted authenticity, and authenticity can be terrifying to someone who has spent years hiding. Perhaps that is the secret beneath the secret. They are not only afraid of telling you what happened.